Why on earth would Hitler declare war on the United States? It's one of the most baffling decisions in modern history. Germany was already bogged down in a brutal war on two fronts against the British Empire and the Soviet Union. The last thing they needed was to provoke the world's largest industrial power. Yet on December 11th, 1941, just 4 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Hitler stood before the Reichstag and did exactly that. It seems like a colossal strategic blunder, a decision that sealed the fate of the Third Reich. But was it really that simple? Was it just an act of madness? Or was there a deeper, more complex logic at play? Today, we're going to unravel the tangled web of motivations, miscalculations, and ideologies that led to this pivotal moment in World War II. Let's set the stage. By late 1941, the war was not going as smoothly for Germany as Hitler had hoped. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, had stalled just outside Moscow. The brutal Russian winter had set in, and the Wehrmacht was facing stiff, unexpected resistance. The quick victory Hitler had promised was nowhere in sight. On the other side of Europe, Britain was bloodied but unbowed, its Royal Air Force and Navy still controlling the skies and seas, strangling Germany with a naval blockade. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States was the so-called arsenal of democracy. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, America was officially neutral. But it was a neutrality that was very much one-sided. Through the Lend-Lease Act, the US was supplying Britain, China, and the Soviet Union with vast quantities of weapons, food, and oil. American warships were even escorting British convoys and engaging in an undeclared naval war with German U-boats in the Atlantic. From Hitler's perspective, the United States was already an unofficial enemy. He saw Roosevelt as a warmonger, actively trying to drag America into the conflict. He believed the US was propping up his enemies and preventing their collapse. Every ship sunk by a German submarine that was carrying American aid was a point of friction. This undeclared war in the Atlantic was a constant source of frustration for the German High Command. Hitler had actually issued strict orders to his U-boat commanders to avoid provoking the Americans, fearing it would give Roosevelt the excuse he needed to formally enter the war. Hitler wanted to choose the time and place for any conflict with the US, not have it dictated by an accidental skirmish at sea. He was essentially fighting a war with one hand tied behind his back. This is where Japan enters the picture. Germany, Italy, and Japan had signed the Tripartite Pact in September 1940. This was a defensive alliance. It stipulated that if any of the signatory powers were attacked by a country not already involved in the European or Sino-Japanese wars, the others would come to its aid. The key word here is attacked. The pact did not obligate Germany to join Japan in an offensive war. So when Japan launched its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Hitler was under no formal treaty obligation to declare war on the United States. Japan was the aggressor. Technically, Germany could have stayed out of it. So why didn't he? Why make a declaration he didn't have to? The first reason is ideology and worldview. Hitler held a deep-seated contempt for the United States. He viewed it as a mongrel nation, a racially mixed society lacking the discipline and martial spirit of Germany or Japan. He believed its democracy was weak and inefficient, and its army was second-rate. He grossly underestimated America's industrial might and its people's will to fight once provoked. He saw American society as decadent, controlled by what he perceived as Jewish financial interests, a recurring theme in his paranoid worldview. In his mind, a conflict with this American construct was not just a possibility, but an inevitability. The second, and perhaps more practical, reason was his relationship with Japan. While the Tripartite Pact didn't force his hand, Hitler saw a golden opportunity. He had been urging Japan to attack British possessions in Asia, like Singapore, to divert British resources away from Europe. He also hoped Japan would attack the Soviet Union from the east, creating a true two-front war for Stalin. While Japan chose to strike south at the US instead, Hitler was still ecstatic. He saw the attack on Pearl Harbor as a gift. He believed that Japan's entry into the war would tie down the American and British navies in the Pacific, preventing them from focusing their full strength against him in the Atlantic. By formally declaring war alongside Japan, he hoped to solidify the alliance and encourage the Japanese to be even more aggressive, perhaps even convincing them to eventually attack the Soviets. It was a show of solidarity he believed would pay dividends. Furthermore, declaring war allowed Hitler to seize the initiative, at least symbolically. For months, he had been reacting to Roosevelt's moves in the Atlantic. Now, by declaring war himself, he could frame the narrative as Germany taking a stand, rather than being dragged into a conflict. It was a matter of honor and prestige. It also unshackled his navy. Now his U-boat commanders could attack American shipping without restriction, anywhere in the world. Hitler believed this would allow him to finally cut Britain's vital Lend-Lease lifeline and starve the island nation into submission. He launched Operation Drumbeat, a devastating U-boat offensive against shipping along the American East Coast, which initially saw tremendous success in early 1942. For a short time, it seemed his gamble might be paying off, but this was a catastrophic miscalculation built on a foundation of flawed assumptions. Hitler fundamentally misunderstood the United States. He saw a divided, isolationist country and failed to recognize that the attack on Pearl Harbor had united it with a furious resolve. His declaration of war 4 days later only solidified this, removing any lingering debate about who the enemy was. It wasn't just Japan anymore, it was the Axis powers. This allowed President Roosevelt to legally implement his Germany First strategy, a plan agreed upon with Churchill long before Pearl Harbor. Despite the public's anger towards Japan, the Allied leadership knew that Germany, with its industrial base, scientific prowess, and formidable army, was the greater long-term threat. Hitler's declaration gave Roosevelt the political cover to prioritize the European theater, pouring American resources and manpower into the fight against Germany, exactly the outcome Hitler had hoped to avoid. In essence, Hitler's decision was a toxic cocktail of ideology, opportunism, and profound underestimation. He believed he was making a shrewd, strategic move, formalizing a conflict that was already happening and freeing his military from constraints. He thought he was solidifying a powerful alliance with Japan that would distract his enemies, and he was driven by a deep ideological belief that a clash with the decadent United States was inevitable and winnable. But he was wrong on every count. He failed to appreciate America's industrial potential, the sleeping giant that Pearl Harbor had awakened. His declaration didn't just invite the giant into the fight, it pointed him directly at Berlin. Instead of being a masterstroke, the decision to declare war on the United States opened a floodgate of American men and materiel into Europe, ensuring Germany's ultimate defeat. It stands as one of the greatest strategic errors of the 20th century, a decision born from hubris that directly paved the road to ruin for the Third Reich. Thank you so much for watching. It's a complex topic, and there are so many layers to it. What do you think was the biggest factor in his decision? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this interesting, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. We'll see you in the next one.